One of the reasons I got my MBA in the first place was because I wanted to have more control over my working circumstances, knowing that one day I wanted kids. And I thought I would have a lot more opportunity to design a schedule that worked for me with an MBA. And so that was a driving decision in getting my master's. But
Did
what's
it work
so
out that way?
it did. I mean,
Okay, so you
right.
felt you did have flexibility as a boss that you might not have if you didn't have an MBA.
Yeah, well, I think it was less about being a boss and more about being desirable by companies that had incredible policies,
Ah,
if that makes sense. I
yes.
wanted to work at companies like American Express that have now 6 months paid maternity leave, that have incredible legal benefits, that have incredible health benefits, that allow you to work from home 2 to 3 days a week. The only reason I joined American Express in the first place back in 2014 was that they had a flexible work arrangement back then. And I lived well over an hour outside of the city. And that was really exciting for me and made me feel like I could have it all. I could do the job and still be a present mother.
Welcome to Women and Work, the show where we take an inside look at how women are overcoming our own unique challenges as we grow our careers or build a business while nurturing relationships and family. I'm Diane Moca, founder and CEO of the Mom Sub app, the childcare app that connects you to a substitute mom. And I want you to know that work can fit your life. Our guests show you the way they've done it. Today, I'm with Chandler Stroud. She got her MBA at Carnegie Mellon and spent her career in marketing at brands like American Express, Heinz, and WebMD. The quintessential climb up the corporate ladder that society views as success. But she left that a little more than a year ago to create the Healing Heroes podcast to empower women to find lasting happiness and health in a hectic world. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chandler.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, I see you had a successful career at big companies, rising to the VP level, which sounds great until the demands and pressures of the job increase along with the pay and the titles, right? And I understand one of the reasons you pivoted away from corporate life was because of burnout. And I wonder if you think that being a woman made you particularly susceptible to that.
Yes, is the short answer. I absolutely do. I think, especially coming out of the collective trauma that was COVID, I feel like the mental load for women just increased so exponentially. And I felt that in a really real way. And when we say mental load and that mental burden, it really revolves around so much more than work, right? Some call it the default parent. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be the mom, but I think the vast majority of times it does turn out to be the female. And you just have to wear so many hats throughout the day. I mean, imagine walking out of a really high stress meeting to text about a play group, or that you're running low on groceries, or that you've got to do the laundry before tomorrow because someone has a soccer game, and you've got coworkers asking you for things at work. So you're constantly taking off and putting back on all of these different hats all day long. And I think it's incredibly stressful. And I think it all often comes down to just intention and where we spend our time and trying to gain control of what we choose to focus on throughout the day. I think that always helped me in small ways, but the burnout's real. There's just a lot of responsibilities in being a high achieving, working, professional, modern woman.
That's for sure. So tell me, as your career is going along for a long time, if it was a series of things that happened and you kept thinking about, maybe I'll make this switch, maybe I'll make this switch, or if there's a particular day and time and instance when you were like, no more. I mean, I interviewed someone where she literally like hit the wall. She was like doing all these things and she turned and she ran into a wall and she's like, well, if this isn't a loud message, I don't know what is. So,
Oh, I love that.
how can you tell us when you realized that burnout was affecting you and your current path was not sustainable and you made a huge shift?
I did make a huge shift, but I don't know that it was a light bulb moment, if I'm being honest. I think it was kind of a slow realization over time. And I will say that for the vast majority of my career, I loved my work. I loved my work. I loved being pushed. I loved mentoring my team into growing into the best versions of themselves. I always asked, like, what do you want to do? Let's give you projects that are going to get you there. Like that was what kept me going. And I love that aspect of it. And that never changed. I think what changed was, in midlife, there are just circumstances and things that occur in your personal life, sometimes in your professional life, that wake you up to the day to day. I think that can be a reorg at the office, and suddenly your perspective on your role within that company or team shifts in some way. It could be an ailing relative or something happening with a family member, which in my case was what happened. My dad got really sick with scary diagnosis in early 2023. And the reality of life and what we choose to do with each day and the fact that he really wouldn't be around forever hit me in a really big way. And if you'd asked me at the time, I don't know that I would have been able to verbalize that. Like, in my eyes and looking at me, I was still going to work, I was still momming, I was still getting the household chores done, and of course, I had help throughout all of this, right? But I was doing okay on the outside. I think it was something shifted within me that I couldn't quite put my finger on, and over time, that just evolved to a place where I engaged with the world around me and my work differently. And truly, it was on a business trip, actually, out to Colorado for work, that a book caught my eye at JFK Airport in New York City. And can't tell you why this book caught my eye, but I wandered over to the end cap and I picked it up. And that book was The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And if you haven't heard about it, it is a very well known book about how trauma impacts your ability to engage with the world around you and how your emotional state dictates your physical state. And I knew I had some traumatic childhood experiences, but something called to me and I picked up the book and I devoured it on the plane out to Colorado. And that was the catalyst for what unfolded and started waking me up to my circumstances, my life, my burnout in the middle of it. And that's really when I started making changes. But I needed that one intervention to sort of shake me a little bit and say, hey, start asking why. Why are you feeling like this? Why does this trigger you? Why are you stressed all the time? And I think peeling back that onion and following wherever that trail leads is really when you start to make changes in your life.
And it opened up, it sounds like, some old wounds that maybe hadn't healed in a way that you didn't recognize. And so I wonder what it was that happened that caused that trauma.
Well, I think it was a number of things. I mean, I am unique in that I knew I had experienced what they call big T trauma. Those are the big ones, right? Whether it's loss, abandonment, grief, abuse, like those types of experiences growing up. And I unfortunately was sexually abused as a child. And,
Sorry.
it's so interesting though, Diane. I really thought I processed it through therapy, through writing. I mean, I was a happy person on the outside, successful by any measure. And it never occurred to me that that experience as a kid was driving how I was showing up in my present. And this has been so interesting for me because I think all women have experiences and many of them think, well, I didn't have it as bad as this person, so it's not, I should be grateful for what I have, but trauma isn't what happened to you, it's how you perceive and experience what happens to you. So it could be as seemingly innocuous as you had to get your tonsils out and visiting hours were just, 2 hours at night and your parents weren't there during the day and so you felt abandoned by them in that moment. you carry that with you throughout your life. And I've learned so much about this. And I think it's fascinating how our past experiences impact how we show up in the present. And it all comes back to what you learned to believe about yourself through those experiences that is dictating how you show up in the present, not just at work, but with your family, with your friends. And once you start going back and kind of digging into those layers, and like you said, feeling through the things that you might not have processed, that's when you learn presence in your life, in your body, connectedness, how to live outside your mind and back in your body and know what fulfills you and what your purpose is. And all of these incredible things come when you can do that kind of work. And so once I started down that path, it was very difficult for me to then go back to this corporate environment and jump on an hour-long call and talk about things that felt really inconsequential to what I was learning through some of the approaches I was taking to heal myself outside of work. And I realized I was doing a disservice to myself by not being fully present and in both of those pursuits. And I was doing a disservice to my team, my incredible team of mostly females below me who needed me, and I wasn't fully there for them. And that's when I really had to take a hard look at I've had an incredible 10 years at this company. I love this company, but I'm doing something that feels more important right now. And I think it's time I lean in and listen to my intuition here and do what's right for me.
Wow. And so you mentioned that you were momming. So how old were your kids at this time? How dependent was your family on your income?
Mm,
Did you have a spouse that made more than you that made this decision easier? Or not saying that, it's different for everyone. Um,
yep.
but what were some of the things that went into the decision? Was it just this inward processing, or were there external things like your children, their ages, their activities, your husband, his income, your lifestyle, whatever that went into all these? And, are you the logical person that sat out and did the pros and cons and calculated the budget and how can we make this work? Or did you just jump off the cliff?
Oh, that's such a great question. And it's so funny because my advice to anyone who would ask me this question might not align with how I handled it, if I'm being honest. But what I will say is that, well, my kids, first off, were about 6 and 8. So they were still quite young when I made this switch. I am married to an incredible partner, and he still does have an amazing job that allowed us the flexibility of at least entertaining me leaving the workforce. And at that point, I had learned so much about trust in something bigger and that things just work out the way they're supposed to. And truly, this is coming from a recovering control freak, anxiety prone individual. I really leaned into it's just going to work out. This feels too right to not pursue it. And I know that the balls will just fall into place. And so, in leaning into that trust and being honest with myself and my leaders at the company at the time, I came forth and I said, here's what's going on with me. I am struggling because I've discovered this thing about myself that I thought was resolved. I realize it's impacting my ability to show up here and be present at work. And I want to take some time off, unpaid, to go address that. And my company at the time was so incredible. They said, we get it. We want to support you. By the way, we think this might qualify for FMLA. And sure enough, it did. And I took the time I needed. And in coming back, I had another honest conversation of like, I'm still not done, but I know you need to fill this role. And it worked out that we parted ways and I packaged out. And that also helped make the transition to this new life of mine much, much easier. So it was kind of half trusting that it was going to work out okay, half knowing that we would figure it out because we still had a stream of income coming in. But I do think that women who are considering a move like this, I think it is that same balance. I think don't go crazy crunching numbers and figuring out how you can possibly make as much or make it work to do what fulfills you, but at the same time be realistic and rational about like what are you going to do near term? What is that bridge to make sure that you are not adding unnecessary stress to your life once you've made this change?
Hmm. So you said that you were A-type personality, hard driving, loved your career. I wonder though, you had two kids, you have two
Mhm.
children.
Yep.
When the kids came along, the first one and then the second one, did you ever even sort of fantasize and flirt with the idea? Did you see stay-at-home moms and go, "Ugh, she has it so easy." Not that she does, we know she doesn't, right? But, were those thoughts even entertained or were those just the furthest thing from your mind? Like, I just never imagined. And you're not saying that you're a stay-at-home mom now. You've replaced one thing for another, but there's a flexibility and with having your own thing versus working corporate America, and you can flex that time up and down in a way that you can't nearly as much when you have a corporate job. So
Yes.
what were your thoughts about this idea? And did you have a period where you're like, I'm just going to enjoy like not having anything that I have to do and just be present with my kids? What was this transition like, and what had been the thoughts about such a thing before that?
Ooh, there's a lot there. I will say one of the reasons I got my MBA in the first place was because I wanted to have more control over my working circumstances, knowing that one day I wanted kids. And I thought I would have a lot more opportunity to design a schedule that worked for me with an MBA. And so that was a driving decision in getting my master's. But
Did
what's
it work
so
out that way?
it did. I mean,
Okay, so you
right.
felt you did have flexibility as a boss that you might not have if you didn't have an MBA.
Yeah, well, I think it was less about being a boss and more about being desirable by companies that had incredible policies,
Ah,
if that makes sense. I
yes.
wanted to work at companies like American Express that have now 6 months paid maternity leave, that have incredible legal benefits, that have incredible health benefits, that allow you to work from home 2 to 3 days a week. The only reason I joined American Express in the first place back in 2014 was that they had a flexible work arrangement back then. And I lived well over an hour outside of the city. And that was really exciting for me and made me feel like I could have it all. I could do the job and still be a present mother. What's so interesting is once I had my kids, I was so eager to go back to work. I mean, I think at the end of my leave, I was like, bummer, I can't believe this is ending. This has been so nice to have all these months at home with my family. But once I got back, it was like, here I am. There now, like I'm back. Like I'm able to flex that creative muscle. I'm talking to other adults. I get to put on real clothes and makeup. And so
Have
I
another
never,
identity besides mom.
yes, another identity. And I never really had that mom guilt because I saw them in the morning before I left and I saw them in the evening when I got home from work. And then I was working from home 2 days a week, so it really was a great balance for me. And I really enjoyed that for the time that it lasted. Now I'm obviously home a lot more. We have since decided not to. We used to have au pairs. That was sort of we did have, day sitting nannies for, many, many years, and then we moved to an au pair model, and then we got rid of all of it when I decided to stay home because, I'm home. Why would we pay for that? And that has been a huge transition because now I am feeling like that stay at home mom handling the laundry and the groceries. And I'm a glorified, like I'm an Uber driver most afternoons going from one activity to another. I really, relish the time I'm getting with my kids, but it's really challenging to carve out those hours to build my business, which is still a huge passion of mine. And so that's why I say the grass is always greener. It's like I wake up so grateful for this flexibility and this life I have created, but I also need to make sure that I'm kind of drawing those lines in the sand and creating those time limits and making sure that I'm still dedicating my efforts to what makes me feel alive as an individual, not just a mom.
Mhm. And you touched on how your childcare has changed over the years. And here at Mom Sub, we want to hear about your childcare journey. So I wonder, when you were pregnant, if you had a particular idea in mind, my child's going to go to daycare after my leave is done, or if you looked into lots of options, nannies, daycares, au pair, and what you decided in the beginning, how it fulfilled or didn't your expectations, and what different things you tried and why and how they changed.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, like thinking back, I don't recall there being a ton of options for daycare where I live for infants through two. I knew preschool started at two in our town. So I always had planned to send my kids to preschool around that age. But I wanted someone here for them at the house where they could be in an environment that they were familiar with. I mean, there's so little at that age when you go back to work, right? If you're lucky, 3 months or more. And I wanted them to have the creature comforts of home, but also develop a really strong relationship with a caretaker. That was important to me. And so I knew right away. I mean, I started interviewing people before I gave birth to my oldest. And I actually found someone who we agreed would start on a part time basis right after he was born and then would go full time when I went back to work. And I loved that because I got to know her during my maternity leave. She would come a couple hours, a few times a week, sometimes just to help with laundry and stuff, but really just to get to know my son and help me, and I could go out and do some things and get errands done. And so we did that for the vast majority of both my son's life and then subsequently my daughter 2 years behind him. And we really loved that model. And then at a point, the only reason I think we moved away from it was my husband ended up having to change jobs at a point, and there was a gap. And we felt like we needed to find a more affordable solution than paying someone hourly for 40 plus hours a week. And so that's when the au pair solution came to us, and we did that. We ended up doing that for many years, and I loved that too. I loved having that energy in our house, especially during COVID. It was so welcome. And then obviously when I stopped working, that changed again. And so, we're in phase 3 at this point. But it's been a journey, and I'm just so grateful to all the women sitters and au pairs that we have had who have taken such great care of my kids. I mean, they are such happy children. And I think being in the energy of those different people and having to go through a transition like that only strengthens their character and builds resilience. And so I was happy to do it.
And I wonder how easy or difficult it was to find the nanny, the first one.
Mm.
If you had maybe just a referral and just contacted them and did a little check and everything was fine, or if you had to go through a lot, what different methods you used. And then I wonder, did that person stay with you until the au pair, or did you have a couple of different nannies? And then the same with the au pair. Did you go through an agency? It's usually someone from another country that lives with you. What was the actual process and how easy or challenging was it?
Yeah, no, all great questions. I think it's always challenging to find good childcare, unfortunately, especially in this country, and it's frustrating for working women that want to feel like they can go to work guilt-free. And we are so fortunate that we found our first nanny off through a reference actually off Facebook. I find Facebook to be an incredibly helpful tool in posting certain job descriptions and having people answer. So that is how I found our first sitter. I posted and someone said, "We're having to move away from this woman who we've loved working with. I'd love to help find her another role. Can I send her your info?" I said, "Absolutely." And it worked out. And she was with us the whole time until we decided to move to an au pair model. In fact, fun fact, and I guess that was when my son was probably about 4 or 5, maybe. And fun fact, she still babysits for them often on the occasional Friday or Saturday night and makes her kind of signature dish that we all love. And it's great to still have her be a part of our lives. And the au pairs I did through an agency because when you work at these large corporations and benefits, they gave me a huge discount on the fee, the annual fee, working with one of two major au pair agencies. And so I chose one knowing there was a local counselor in my area and decided to just go ahead and partner with them and find an au pair in their system. So that's how I chose the au pair system. And I loved that entire experience. The one thing I will say is that similar to finding childcare locally, it comes with its own challenges. It can be very stressful when you're trying to match with someone who is looking for what you have to offer. Sort of felt like speed dating whenever we had to go through that process. But, we were lucky. We found some great women throughout that entire experience. So, yeah.
Mhm. And so when you had that childcare in place, did it help with your productivity at work, your focus at work? Like, did you have someone where you were like, I wasn't constantly worrying, like, oh, my schedule's changed. Oh, I have to stay late at this meeting. And are they gonna work with me? Or, oh my gosh, what are my kids doing? Oh, I haven't gotten a picture in like 5 hours. Like, what were your thoughts at work as it related to childcare? Was it kind of a set it and forget it? This is like awesome, or were there bumps?
I think there's always bumps in the beginning as you're getting to understand personalities and set expectations and make sure everyone kind of knows their role. And I don't mean just the sitter, but you as well, and what your obligations are as the mom. So I always say the first 2 weeks of getting a new au pair in our house was really painful, no matter how incredible they were, because everyone's sort of like finding their stride. But after that, it was incredible because once you build that type of relationship and dialogue with another person and the trust starts to build, I really felt like I could step away and everything was fine. I mean, they knew that if they texted me, I would answer. I have an Apple Watch. I can see when my au pair or my sitter is texting me on my arm in meetings. And they reserved that outreach for really important moments. They weren't asking about playdates or groceries or things that I wanted them to feel autonomous making decisions on. And I think that was more fulfilling for them knowing that they had that kind of autonomy. I think I want to take Riley to the playground today, or I'm going to schedule a play date with this other family. And, there'd be questions like, are you comfortable with having kids at the house? And I would say yes, as long as we kind of have a sense of who the parents are. And, I think that's fine. And you can take them places that you think are safe. And I think as long as that understanding exists, it's so imperative that you trust the people that are watching your children because it creates emotional space and freedom for you as well. And I could focus on work. And I was so grateful, especially during those au pair days, because the schedule is a little bit more flexible than when I had someone come like 7 to 7 every day, and knew someone would be home if I got stuck on the train or something broke down. But yeah, I really was able to focus and throw myself into my job all day, every day for in both scenarios, not just the au pair, but even the sitter as well. And it was great. It was so good for me, and I think good for them.
Mhm. And we hear so much from working women, on LinkedIn and other places where they're getting close to burnout because of all the demands of default parenting, which can often be delegated and eased by having great childcare, especially in your home and someone flexible and someone that can do a lot of those things. And I wonder if you felt in the workplace, because you kind of had that piece taken care of, you had a good person, they could handle a lot, that you could not have as many of those burdens that maybe a working mom might have, but were there still challenges that you feel you faced, maybe for instance during the reorg that you talked about, when you feel it was particular to you because you were a woman? And had you been a man in the same situation and facing that challenge, it would have been different.
You know, that it's possible that
Mhm.
that could have been at play. I think for me, I again, the company I worked for was just so incredible and flexible, and I really did what I needed. I never stopped to wonder, am I going to get in trouble for doing this? Or should I not be leaving work early? Or if I need to take a half day because my kid is sick, I just took it.
Or am I going to rise up the ranks if I do these things? Or am I going to rise up the ranks if they know I'm a mom and this other man who's going for the same position, you
The
know,
traditional, yeah,
right. So, and
yeah.
many women tell me that, but it's if it's not true, that's wonderful. Like that there are companies out there where that bias doesn't exist, or maybe it was the way you approached, one of the big questions we ask in this podcast is, what were unique challenges you faced as a woman? And many people feel like it's not something within their control, that the challenges were other people's biases. And then,
Mm.
I mean, everyone has challenges. Men have challenges too. We're not saying they don't. Women have unique challenges. But I wonder if your workplace made those unique challenges fewer and made them, less impactful or less overwhelming. And what, the other challenges were, perhaps when your dad got sick, I don't know if you have siblings, but if you, as maybe the only daughter, I'm being hypothetical, took on more of the caregiving, like were there any things that related to your working life, your career, and your personal life and your whole life that made life more challenging because you were a woman?
I think yes, definitely. I mean, I found it was hard to relax. And I think it's so important to take that time to just sit with yourself and be. And what female who works in an office and has children and responsibilities at home, who does that on a regular basis? Like, when is their time? So I think that was the unique challenge, was that I was still wearing all of those hats all day long at the office, right? I was still scheduling the exterminator to come or the chimneys to get cleaned and helping with play dates and social activities for me and my husband on the weekends and then shooting off an email because I realized something's due. So I think being in that role, there are unique challenges as a woman because there's more distraction from what you're there to do. They're important distractions, but there's just a lot of plates in the air that you're juggling at any given time. And like I said, I do believe that most often it is the woman that takes on a lot of that burden. And so I think the challenge is in that. But what I will say, crediting the company I worked for at the time, they made that so much easier. And I know that's not true of all companies out there, but I always felt like I could take that time without being questioned or penalized. I always felt I could leave the office at 4 o'clock to make a train so that I saw my kids at night for dinner. And I felt like I had license to be ambitious in the workplace because I saw that our C suite of executives was heavily female dominated. The female leadership that existed at American Express and still does was so strong and so inspiring that it really made me want to work harder and reach those upper levels of the company just so that I could learn from them and work with them. And so I think having that vision, having those mentors and seeing that within a company is so critically important for the success of morale and female employees. And I was very lucky that I felt like I had that flexibility, I had those role models, and was able to then manage and navigate all of the things that were happening in my life professionally and personally throughout the time that I was with the company.
It's so refreshing to hear that, there are companies out there that are very supportive and that you felt like, there was no glass ceiling, there was no limit, but you still made this decision. And
Mm.
so why the healing heroes? Why was this something that called you in a way that you left all that where, you had, say, everyone's path has bumps along the way, but say a smoother path than someone else whose company may not have been, as flexible. You had the financial resources to have great care at home, so you had all the pieces in place, and that's not just okay, it's we should go down the path that feels right to us, even if it's like, well, you have everything, why would you leave that? Because it doesn't feel right to me anymore. But why this particular new entity that you created? What's the purpose? What was it that was calling you, and how has it evolved in ways you expected and didn't expect since you made that leap and just, made the jump and quit and then started this new thing?
Yeah, I think I see myself in so many other women in who are doing this work. And I mean, like going to work every day, fighting for those promotions, for the praise, doing the people pleasing. Like, I know what it's like to be the woman who is trying to hold it all together, who's trying to show up at home for the people she loves, who's trying to be the best employee she can be, who can still feel connected to her friends, who might be managing anxiety, burnout, stress. Maybe she has some weight she wants to lose. Maybe she's in perimenopause or menopause. There's just a lot going on in her life. And in doing this work, I have learned to be present with myself and my body in a way that I don't think would have felt safe prior to healing and trying some of the holistic practices that I've become accustomed to. And what I say, the root of all healing, I'll just distill this. I truly, healing is about coming home to yourself. It is about rediscovering your self worth and knowing that you are enough just as you are. And that sounds cliche, I know. I would have told you I was enough. I am confident. I am crushing life prior to this work and doing the journey. But I am here to tell you that there is most oftentimes a subconscious loop in your mind keeping you stuck. And I say subconscious, that's a very important word. Most high achieving women don't even realize it's there. And once I started doing this work, I achieved new levels of joy, of fulfillment, of happiness. And I don't feel it in my body and soul every day. I see it on the faces of my kids. I see it in how I'm able to love my husband. I see it in how I engage with my community in a completely different way. And it has awakened me to my life in the middle of it. And you can't experience something like that and see that so many other people need it and not go help them try to find it. Once I saw that there is a way to help women live differently in this life, I have to help them do it. Like that is a calling, and I feel so passionate about it. And I know how to help them. The ones that are ready, I can help you. And because I've done it, I was you. And again, once you see that future and you feel that purpose in the depths of your soul, and I really mean that, you can't turn your back on it and go back to whatever you were doing before. You have to chase it. And it's been so fulfilling. I mean, yeah, you don't, I don't expect my life to look the way it was. I'm confident that it's going to all work out and that things are going to fall into place. But I just know that this is more important, and it feels so aligned with what I'm here to do and how excited I get talking about it. And so, yeah, so that was enough for me to make that change and risk losing the stability that I had created over a very long, successful career.
And you had very much clarity, I can tell, on the idea of this. And I think for a lot of people, there is a question in their mind, maybe in the deep recesses, that, well, they know what they want. They want kids, they want a career, they want a nice house, but do they really know what they want? I think
Hmm.
sometimes it's harder for people to get what they want because they don't know what they want. They don't even know that they don't know what they want. And then once they realize it, then taking the steps to get it, it's almost like you're 60% of the way there once you know what you want and you've got that clarity. And then you just need to take the steps to actually like be brave and do it. So I wonder what you say to people who are like, that's so great that you found your calling. And I'm happy, but I don't feel that deep sense of purpose, like I tell people I'm devoting the next 10 years of my life to building this legacy of solving the childcare crisis that's causing so much stress and guilt for moms. It's my purpose,
I love that. We
but
need someone to do it.
thank you. But others, may not have that much conviction, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they're seeking it. It may feel like something's missing. So I
Yes.
wonder what you would say to them that don't have that clarity that both you and I have been fortunate to have.
I would say get curious with yourself. As you said, you don't know why you feel the way you feel about certain things. Ask yourself why. Why do you think it's important to have four kids? Like, do you want four kids, or is someone telling you you should have four kids because that signals something else? And that's just one example. But like, why do you believe the things you believe? Why are they important to you? Get curious about yourself. Ooh, that really upset me when my boss pulled me into the office and said X, Y, or Z, or they took this project and gave it to somebody else. Like, what is that? Why am I so triggered by that? What's that feeling? When have I felt that before in my life? Can I go back and wonder? And you start to connect dots, but we can't know what's holding us back until we get curious about ourselves and why we are interacting and engaging with the world around us the way we are. So I think that's the first step, is simply to get curious and ask yourself, what are your beliefs and why do you believe them? Did someone tell them to you, or do you truly believe that? And I think that's a really important first step. And then to your point, I think what follows is a really important mix of having a roadmap and a guide for how to think about a framework for unraveling what your purpose is and what your calling is, but also not making it prescriptive, making sure that it's authentic to the individual so that she can practice what feels comfortable and right for her. And so that's really where the rubber meets the road. I think we hear all the time from media and so many different places, like meditate, journal, get in nature, self care, exercise. That's all great. But a lot of women come to me and they say, we don't know where to start.
And it's
Like,
just another thing to add to
it's
the list.
just another thing. It's just another thing. But what I've come to learn is that taking care of yourself and really healing can be so fun. It can be so much fun. Yes, there's work involved. It is not an overnight transformation, but it can be really, really fun. And I think once you start doing that work, you'll answer those questions. You can't know what your calling or purpose is if you are not showing up for yourself in the right way in the present. If you don't know where you're going, and I don't mean like, I want to buy this car, or I want to have this house, or I want to have this job. I mean, anchor your future in a feeling. How do you want to feel in your future? That's where you start. The how doesn't matter. God, the universe, whatever you believe in, will give you the how, however it's going to be delivered. But you got to tell God and the universe what you're aiming for. How do they collaborate with you to create it if you don't even know where you're going? You're living on autopilot. You're reacting to your life. You're not being intentional about the decisions you make that are going to get you closer to that end game. And then we can't forget our past. You have to go back and feel through the things that are keeping you stuck, the things you might not even realize are keeping you stuck. And there's a roadmap for doing that. And the ways of peeling back that onion can be really fun, can be forms of self care, and will help you connect with yourself and someone else there on your journey to support you in ways that are so miraculous and unbelievable. And I really want to inspire and encourage women to be open to it, because being present with yourself will unlock so much joy and so much potential for you in your life that you probably never thought possible. And I want women to live like that. And hey, you may wake up and say, I'm getting to do this creative thing that I know I'm meant to do in my job. We still need doctors and business professionals and lawyers and all of those people. You just have to know, I'm here because this is what I am meant to do. And then you know how to bring that to life in a way that's authentic to you. So I think it's a really fun exploration, and I encourage all women to do it.
And you role model that for your children. Children do what you do, not
Mm,
what you say, right? And so I want
yes.
to ask about this clarity that you had to find this information, change, yourself, and then share it. And you thought, okay, a vehicle to share it would be creating this podcast where you and a group of hero experts are talking about all of this to share it. But do Is this a business? Are you
Mm.
are you generating money? Are you able to generate money? What's your vision? Do you see it growing? Do you see yourself creating a course and then, going out and speaking and coaching? Or are you just taking it one step at a time?
Well, the latter. I am taking it one step at a time. But what I will say is that it started as a podcast. And I like to call that, like, not to get woo. I mean, again, I come from a corporate background, but it was truly a divine download. I went to sleep one night with no idea of a podcast in my head. And I shot out of bed the next morning at 4 a.m., grabbed my computer and ran downstairs, and 12 pages of content poured from me. Like, I knew exactly the business plan. I knew the content pillars. I knew how I was going to get it out there and market it. I had a marketing background. I'd only overseen one podcast before, but it was like everything I had done up in my life had led to this moment of feeling capable of bringing this vision to life. I didn't know how I was going to get all 12 of my healers to sign on to do this work, but I had to try. And sure enough, I asked and it worked. And they all said yes. And a year and a half later, here we are. So we've had some ad sponsorships, and I do expect the podcast to be a revenue generating arm at some point. But anyone in podcasting knows that it takes 18 to 24 months, usually at minimum, to really start seeing that take traction. There's millions of podcasts out there, and it's very hard to get those ad dollars. So that would be one arm of the business. I've always envisioned others. The hard part is prioritizing where to focus your attention first, second, and third.
Different hats again.
You
Yeah.
got it. You got it. So, what I will say is, I actually finished a beta test this summer of what I call a digital community, which takes the podcast to the next level. We educate and give people free resources and things as part of the podcast. The academy, I call it Happiness Academy, is that roadmap. So many women have said, what do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? Based on my experience and the model in which I still use every day to heal and continue finding joy and health, I brought that to life in a curriculum and opened it up to a digital community of women who are like minded and also on healing journeys of their own. And we do regular calls with me and my heroes, who are my actual healers that I leaned on to find this new life and this transformation. And so I want to be the bridge that connects them with women who need them. And so we do calls with them. And so the academy will be my like primary revenue generating arm of the business. I hope to do the official launch this fall, latest Jan 1. And then finally, speaking also, I think, it's really important to connect with women and not just share my story, but like give them a picture of what else is there for them, like what they can turn to, practices they can employ every day, no matter how busy they are. And so I really want to share more in the speaking space as well. And I, from there, will evolve into two or three other ideas. But I have to pace myself. So that's the next phase of the Healing Heroes.
Mhm. And you've learned so much during this career journey, motherhood journey, reawakening journey. I wonder, with all that you know now, if you could go back to an earlier version of you, what you would change if you had this knowledge now back then, if there's any one thing.
If I could go back and tell myself one thing at any point along my journey leading up to now, I think the most impactful thing I could tell her is, you are doing a good job and you are amazing just as you are. Love yourself every day. Every day for the rest of your life, I want you to look in the mirror and say, I love you. High five yourself if that's easier. We'll tap into Mel Robbins here for a second. But I don't think our generation was taught self-love from our parents, and that's no fault of our parents. They didn't learn it either. But the more I remind my children to love themselves, it's incredible how I see them grow and expand. And I really believe that that is the root of all healing, is learning to love yourself as you are and not work for that praise and promotions, as I like to say, productivity. I find we often do all day long to distract ourselves, sometimes from feeling what we don't want to feel, other times because we believe the more we do, the more valuable we are. And I believed that for so long, even though I don't think I consciously would have told you that. So I truly believe the most impactful thing I could have done for myself is to go back and say, I want you to tell yourself and try to full body believe it in the moment you're saying it. I love you. Because you can, neuroplasticity is a thing. You absolutely can rewire your subconscious mind and tell yourself new stories. So I think that's really impactful.
Well, we love you for coming on this podcast and sharing so much and being so raw and real. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode and were inspired by Chandler's story, we want you to share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe to meet our next amazing guest. If you want to invest in a solution to the childcare crisis, check out MomSub's equity crowdfunding campaign at momsub.com/invest, or connect with MomSub on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social media channels. That's MomSub, like a substitute mom. And remember, your career, your choices, and your success are yours to define. So keep pushing boundaries and spreading your love and encouragement to other women who need it.